He didn't just call it up, he filled the tree. Just like Harry Reid, he filled the tree, blocking everyone else's amendment. And by the way, I agree with Senator Reid when he said the Obamacare amendment is a cynical amendment. Of course it is. It is empty showmanship. We'll have a vote on repealing Obamacare. The Republicans will all vote yes. The Democrats will all vote no. It will be at a 60-vote threshold. It will fail. It will be an exercise in meaningless political theater. Now, mind you, when we had a fight in October of 2013 to actually stop Obamacare and to defund it, the majority leader, then the minority leader, was opposed to doing something with real teeth in it to stop Obamacare. But an empty show vote, that's a good way of distracting from what's going on. You know, there is a profound disappointment among the American people. Because we keep winning elections, and then we keep getting leaders who don't do anything they promised. The American people were told, if only we have a Republican majority in the House, things will be different. Well, in 2010, the American people showed up in enormous numbers, and we got a Republican majority in the House. And very little changed. Then the American people were told, you know, the problem is the Senate. If only we get a Republican majority in the Senate and retire Harry Reid as majority leader, then things will be different. Well, in 2014, the American people rose up in enormous numbers, voted to do exactly that. We've had a Republican majority in both houses of Congress now for about 6 months. What has that majority done? First thing we did in December is we came back and passed a $1 trillion cromnibus plan filled with pork and corporate welfare. That was the very first thing we did. Then this Republican majority voted to fund Obamacare, voted to fund President Obama's unconstitutional executive amnesty, and then leadership rammed through the confirmation of Loretta Lynch as Attorney General. Madam President, which of those decisions would be one iota different if Harry Reid were still majority leader? Not a one. Not a one. This Senate operates exactly the same. The same priorities. And let me tell you why. It's not that this majority doesn't get things done. It does get things done, but it listens to one and only one voice. That is the voice of the Washington cartel, of the lobbyists on K Street, of the big money and big corporations. You know, if you go to the American people and ask, is reauthorizing the XM Bank a priority for you? The standard response for most of them will be, the what? They don't even know what this is. Let me tell you what it is. It is an egregious example of corporate welfare. It is the American taxpayers being on the dime for hundreds of billions of dollars in loan guarantees given out to a handful of giant corporations. It is a classic example of cronyism and corporate welfare. And by the way, among others, you know one person who had the clarity of thought on that? Then Senator Barack Obama, who described it as a classic example of corporate welfare. That was when he was in the Senate. Now that he's in the White House, corporate welfare sounds pretty good. Now just about all of the Democrats are supporting the corporate welfare, with the exception of Bernie Sanders. I'll give credit to Senator Sanders for standing up against corporate welfare. But every Democrat who rails against big money and corruption of Washington, every Democrat who styles himself or herself a populist, their actions on this matter speak far louder than their words. And when it comes to Republicans, Republicans also are listening to K Street and the lobbyists. Why? It's not complicated. The giant corporations that are getting special favors from the taxpayers hire an army of lobbyists that write campaign checks after campaign checks. And by the way, these checks go to both Democrats and Republicans. It is career politicians in both parties that are kept in office by looting the taxpayer to benefit wealthy, powerful corporations. There are a host of amendments that the American people are focused on, things like defunding Planned Parenthood after the gruesome video. Majority Leader doesn't want to vote on that. That's actually something the American people are focused on. He brought up his Obamacare amendment as a smokescreen because it's intended to fail. But you know what he didn't bring up is my amendment to end the congressional exemption from Obamacare, the corrupt deal that Harry Reid cut with President Obama to exempt members of Congress. We ought to live under the same rules as everyone else. Majority Leader doesn't want to vote on that because he doesn't want to end the cronyism for members of Congress any more than end the cronyism for giant corporations who enrich themselves at the expense of the American people. There are a host of priorities that the voters who elected you and me. Madam President, I would ask you to think about when you were running for the Senate not too long ago. Do you recall any of your constituents ever saying, we want the Export-Import Bank? No, they want other things. They have other priorities, but those are not the priorities of Republican leadership. Sadly, today we have government of the lobbyist, by the lobbyist, and for the lobbyist. That is not how the United States Senate is supposed to operate. A far more important amendment than bringing back this corporate welfare and cronyism is my amendment that provides that sanctions on Iran cannot be lifted unless and until Iran does two things. Number one, it recognizes Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. And number two, it releases the 4 American hostages languishing in Iranian prisons. That is a far more important issue than enriching some more lobbyists on K Street and getting a few more campaign contributions.